What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, December 12th, 2017. Getting into the week here, a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. A couple of quick program notes. Tomorrow in our third hour, we're going to have Don Wiskin of Extendovite talking about his wonderful product. Claire and I both use it. It does seem to be making a positive difference. And then on the 21st, Donald Jeffries, author of the book Survival of the Richest, will be our third hour guest. And of course, Friday in our third hour, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us. Well, it's election day in Alabama, and the voters are heading to the polls in what is turning out to be a very contentious race. And it's kind of interesting. There's been a new development in this court case to preserve the voting records. Now, remember, this all started when the state of Alabama declared, because this was a special election, the normal rules for preservation of the votes, the actual scans of the ballots, wouldn't apply in this case. So some voting accuracy activists, if you will, went to court, and they got a court order saying all election records must be preserved if there's a suspicion of fraud, which given last year's election is a very reasonable suspicion. Then at the last second, the Alabama State Supreme Court stayed the Montgomery County Circuit Court's order directing Alabama election officials to preserve the digital ballot images. That basically ends it. There isn't enough time to go back to court or to federal court to try and reverse this. Basically, it means that once the election is over and they announce a winner, the records can be erased, and that will be the end of any potential challenges. Oddly enough, the Democrats are claiming that the decision by the Alabama Supreme Court proves that the Republicans are going to try and steal the election, even though it was Republicans that were behind the initial lawsuit to make sure the voting records were being preserved. Now, as you know, all through the smear job on Roy Moore with all the sexual allegations, which have now been discredited, he was leading in the polls, and all of a sudden yesterday, Fox News comes out with a poll saying that Doug Jones is 10 points ahead. Wow, what a sudden come-from-behind victory this is indicating. Frank Lutz actually told Neil Cavuto he doesn't trust the Fox News poll. And we're probably, there's good reason to do that. Remember all the polls last year from all of the corporate media? Hillary's going to win 95%. She's way ahead. So we'll see what's going to happen. But I do think the Democrats are going to try and steal this one because they're desperate to take control of Congress next year. They're desperate to block Trump from this point on. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Tony in Puerto Rico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Mike. Yeah, I have a quick question, Mike. I was watching a documentary yesterday on Timothy Leary. He mentioned that JFK used to drop acid with Mary Pinchin Meyer. My question is, was that true, and did that change his perception of the world in regards to peace?
I really don't know if that was true or not, but I think there's a lot of things that can change your perception of the world, and it doesn't have to be an illicit drug. Certainly what I went through over the Vince Foster murder and the consequences of trying to go public on that, certainly that changed my view of the world, and there weren't any narcotics involved with that. And yes, before you start writing on in, I understand LSD technically isn't a narcotic.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you. We're going to let you go. Getting on back to the Middle East, this brouhaha over Jerusalem is not showing any signs of slowing down. We're seeing these articles all over the place. And by the way, there are so many of them, I can't include them all in the talking points. But coming out of Gulf News, they're basically saying that because of what Donald Trump just did, the entire U.S. Middle East political framework has collapsed. Obviously, the Palestinian National Authority is in a very tough spot. but it's just causing chaos all across the Middle East and huge amounts of anger. And basically Trump has ended the peace process, despite Nikki Haley's assurances to the contrary at the United Nations, basically has killed the two-state solution. And more importantly, the U.S. government has lost all credibility as an impartial peace broker in the Middle East between Israel and its neighbors. Netanyahu's out there joking about two-state solution. Where do you want to send the Palestinians? Costa Rica? So he's starting to gloat. It may be premature, but he's starting to gloat here. Trump's Jerusalem bid creates new tensions in the Middle East. This is coming from Iran's Rouhani. And he's basically denounced Trump's announcement as incorrect and illegal to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Because under the original United Nations partition plan, Jerusalem is a city that is supposed to be shared among the major religions. It doesn't belong to Israel. Doesn't belong to anybody. It's an international city. And in point of fact, the United Nations has repeatedly passed resolutions reminding Israel that Jerusalem does not belong to them, other than that one-quarter section, and reminding them that any actions by Israel to seize the city as their capital are illegal under international law. But of course, Israel's attitude is, we're above the law. And Israel, of course, holds the world's record for most resolutions passed against it by the United Nations, which is, of course, why Nikki Haley is up there saying, the UN is so unfair. They're so unfair. No, what's causing all of this is not the United Nations, but the actions of Israel's government. We're talking about a few individuals in positions of power who abuse that power and feel they're above international law. And Nikki Haley's out there trying to stop the anti-Israel resolutions by saying you're not being fair. That's like a cop pulling Nikki Haley over in the car for speeding, and Nikki Haley saying, you're only giving me a ticket because you hate me. You're being unfair. I mean, that's how ridiculous all of this gets. We're going to do a shout-out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, here is where things are getting tense. We already know that people are starting to die over there in the protests and the violence, and Israel's bombing Gaza again. And so apparently the commanders of the Al-Qassam brigades, which is the armed wing of Hamas, and also the Islamic Jihad brigades in Gaza, the Iranian general stressed that forces in the Middle East are ready to unite to defend the Al-Aqsa Mosque, because we know that ultimately Israel wants to tear down the Muslim holy sites and put up their third/fourth temple, even though it's not exactly in the right location. So this is building to a new regional Mideast war here. Another article out of Desert Peace, Trump's decision will only lead to more deaths. Yes, mostly Palestinian deaths, but still deaths. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Tunisia, specifically a Tunisian labor union, has decided they're going to boycott all U.S. ships docking at a seaport in the country's southern region of Sfax, following Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And that means any ships arriving from the United States will not be unloaded. That's going to have a ripple effect into the economy of those shipping lines and the companies that were trying to ship goods to Tunisia for sale. Now, we're still hearing that Arab leaders are discussing and planning a major response to Trump's statement on Jerusalem, even as they continue to insist that Trump's statement does not alter the legal status of Jerusalem at all. It was an empty symbolic gesture, which has set the entire region on fire. And I suspect that their response will be economic. They're already boycotting the visiting U.S. vice president. And they're basically saying this was a very serious affront to the Muslim world by Donald Trump, and it requires a response of equal severity. Putin is out there saying the Jerusalem move may end the peace process. I think that's a given. Israel never wanted a peace process. Israel never wanted a two-state solution. Israel wants it all. Now, the European Union is once again reminding Netanyahu that they have rejected Donald Trump's statement on Jerusalem. And the more I think about it, the more I'm thinking that Netanyahu thought this was going to go down the same way as the founding of Israel itself. Because after the Zionists went on in and they grabbed a chunk of Palestine and they declared themselves the nation of Israel, U.S. President Harry S. Truman signed a letter recognizing the state of Israel. Now, the original letter said the Jewish state, and Truman actually crossed that out and said state of Israel. Some minor footnote to what's going on. But as soon as Truman had done that, the rest of the world's nations hopped on board and said, well, if the United States is recognizing the government of Israel, we will as well. And I think Netanyahu was really expecting the same thing was going to happen now. Trump would say Israel is the capital of Jerusalem, and everybody else would nod and say, yeah, okay, sure, fine, the U.S. says so. And I think it may be a mark of the decline of the United States in prestige around the world that did not happen. Now, apparently in Jordan and Egypt, in a symbolic gesture, they're renaming the streets around the U.S. embassies. They're renaming them Al-Quds to send a subtle message about how they feel about this. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem, Palestinian protesters barred a Bahraini delegation visiting Israel from entering the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So tensions are running very, very high. Iran's defense minister, General Amir Hatami, has said that this decision by Donald Trump is actually going to accelerate the eventual destruction of Israel, and it's going to unite all Muslims across the region, and we're definitely seeing that happen. And apparently the response to this is spreading up in Sweden. Firebombs have been hurled at Jewish sites. Of course, it's being denounced as anti-Semitism, and it's got no connection whatsoever to Trump in Jerusalem. It's just more of that Jew hate out there. It's just coincidentally timed is all. Apparently a poll was just conducted. This is coming out of Desert Peace, showing that Netanyahu is the least popular Middle East leader. Now, Netanyahu, of course, is declining to comment on that, but they like to play up his successes in expanding Israel's diplomatic portfolio and cachet in the world. In other words, continuing to subvert and undermine other people's governments. So, getting on down to Syria, we're getting to the end of the year, and this is when people sort of look back and they sum up what was actually accomplished. And looking back over the last year, Syrian government forces liberated 67,000 square kilometers of territory over the last 7 months. 1,000 localities, 78 oil and gas fields, 2 deposits of phosphate ores. All of this was being used by ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They were basically stealing Syria's oil, smuggling it across the border into Turkey, and selling it. And now they can't do that anymore because they've lost control of it. Colonel General Surovikin added that Russian warplanes have flown 6,956 sorties, and helicopters conducted more than 7,000 sorties, killing over 32,000 militants and destroying 394 battle tanks, that's the big heavy ones, and 12,000 pieces of other equipment. Gee, I wonder where ISIS and Al-Qaeda got all that stuff. Maybe that might be part of that missing $8 trillion from the Pentagon. Now, Russia is starting to withdraw their forces from Syria. The United States insists they have to stay because ISIS and Al-Qaeda may return someday, ignoring the fact that Syria wants them to go and they have no legal right to be there. But in summation, looking back, it turns out our corporate media were completely wrong about Assad and the Islamic State, because when the U.S. stopped that whole nonsense about Assad gassing his own people and they rebranded the Syrian war as we're after ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They kept saying, well, we'll never be rid of ISIS and Al-Qaeda while Assad is in power. Assad has to go, and then we can get rid of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Well, ISIS and Al-Qaeda are pretty much gone, and Assad is still there. And the corporate media is trying very, very hard to not have to go back and admit that, yeah, they were wrong about that one as well. Now, apparently Donald Trump, as part of his attempt to reignite the war fever in Syria, showed a video of a Free Syrian Army commander named Omar Garba destroying a statue of the Virgin Mary as the group invaded a Syrian Christian town. Let's get all the Catholics riled up against the Muslims and give them all swords and helmets. It turns out the video was actually shot in 2013 when the Free Syrian Army was being supported by the United States of government. They were deemed a moderate. The U.S. was funding these people at the same time this video was made. Now, over at NATO, the U.S. is demanding NATO action on Russian missiles. And basically the idea is that the U.S. believes a certain class of Russian intermediate range missile is a violation of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. Not that the U.S. government has got a great record of keeping its treaty obligations, but they're trying to make a big stink out of this, demanding NATO formulate a response. Now, Russia's position is these rockets do not meet the definitions of the weapons that were banned by the INF Treaty. Now, the upshot of it is that the U.S. government may say the treaty is now null and void and will be off into yet another arms race of nuclear-tipped missiles. Meanwhile, in another sign of Russia's growing global influence, the Russian Defense Ministry is seeking to boost naval cooperation with Japan, and they're working on a draft deal. It's starting out on very small stuff like guarantees for mutual search and rescue effort. If a submarine goes down, both countries will go looking for it and try and rescue it. That's actually a plus for Japan because nobody does deep ocean exploration and salvage the way the Russians do. Absolutely amazing stuff that they've built over there. Well, you all saw the Keldysh in Titanic and Ghosts of the Abyss. It's an amazing ship. Now, South Korea just did something very, very smart. South Korea has politely asked the United States to halt all military exercises near the Korean Peninsula until after the Winter Olympics, hoping to calm things down so that North Korea will not take any provocative actions during the Olympic Games, which Seoul wants to use to showcase the country's development. Now, with the U.S. talking about not showing up and the brouhaha over Russia, I don't think the Olympics are going to get much larger an audience than the NFL currently does. But we'll see what's going to happen on that. There's actually been some developments on the Russia front on that one. But whether the U.S. will go along with that, we don't know. Whether the U.S. will use the Winter Olympics as a false flag, that's also possible. Remember the Munich massacre? And that one turned out to have been a staged false flag to demonize the Palestinians and build world sympathy for Israel. Now, we're going into a very hard, very brutal winter. It's really starting to show up all over the planet. And unfortunately, North Korea does get very harsh winters, and the current sanctions placed on North Korea could result in a lot of people really suffering. And the UN is saying the sanctions have to be modified to allow for humanitarian assistance so the North Koreans aren't freezing to death over the winter. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with a phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And get out your paper and pencil because once again, I'm going to share the address and phone number with you where you can help support Republic Broadcasting. And the postal address for check, money order, box tops, gift certificates is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. And the phone number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And I want to make a point here. We understand how tight things are economically. We live with that reality every day. None of us are getting rich here. And if it were possible, we'd love to go on giving you all of this information at no charge, for free. But if somebody's paying for the media like a corporation, then you're going to get the corporation's point of view and not something that's more objective. And I just want you to consider something. I know a lot of people are saying, I'd love to help, but boy, I can't afford that much money. It doesn't take that much. If every single person listening to this broadcast or podcast were to send in just $5, it would really help Republic Broadcasting. It would allow us to get updated equipment, because we know there's a lot of you out there. On the Part 15 hobby transmitters, the podcasts, the YouTube videos, we know you're out there. If every one of you, consider this a dare. I dare you all each to send in $5. Remember, Christmas is coming up, and I have an inside line to Santa Claus, so I'll get you put on the naughty list if you don't chip in right now. But seriously, we need your help. We're in the fight to save the country, first of all, and to avoid a world war and save the planet. You can be a part of that for just $5. Anyway, let's go to the phones here. Chris in Canada. Aloha, Chris. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. First-time caller. Listen, I was hoping for your guidance, please. I'm going to a community organization that focuses on nutrition. They're having their annual general meeting this evening, and things have kind of gone sour there lately. And I'm wondering if it's being infiltrated by people on the supposed liberal left. And so I'm wondering what I could determine, were I to get a copy of their financials. Because I want to lean on your research skills here, what must I do in order to backtrack and find out if they might have gotten any money from groups of the like of George Soros and company?
Well, are they a 501c3 nonprofit organization? Because if they are, then the records do have to be made available to the public. If it's a little ad hoc group, then short of getting a lawyer and suing, I don't know what you could do about that. But stepping on back from that, it's entirely possible for these groups to be infiltrated. It doesn't have to be by the left. It could be by corporate interest groups. Corporate espionage is big business, and infiltrating groups that might pose a threat to their business is something they do. In fact, we're going to be talking about that a little bit later in the show. And a good example I can think of was when Claire and I were living in Washington State, and there was a community organization that had gotten together to try and preserve the old-growth forests, and they got infiltrated by these undercover, what they call grassroots lobbyists, saying, you know, those old-growth forests, they're a horrible fire hazard, and we should just let Weyerhaeuser go on down and cut those trees down. And they were there. The reason I know they were there is because I'd ridden up from Los Angeles to Seattle on a plane sitting next to one of these people who just said, yeah, this is what I do for a living. So they can be infiltrated. Doesn't have to be the left. Could be somebody who feels that what you're doing is a threat to their business model, like fast food companies or processed food companies in the supermarket.
Well, I know they're not profit. I don't know the regulations in either Canada or the United States of America. But just for my own peace of mind, like I've heard you often, advise people, follow the money trail. So for my own peace of mind, I was just hoping if I were to score their financials, how I'd go about backtracking where the sources of their money, the origins of their finances.
Well, again, it depends on what records are made available to the public. You certainly don't want to go on in and try and steal those records. And again, because you're in Canada, I'm not familiar with Canadian law on this issue. You probably, if you really want to pursue this, you need to seek legal counsel in Canada.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, I appreciate your time, and I heard your message earlier. Wish you best to your thundering.
All right, well, thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for that. All right, now, getting on back to the war zones, there are rumblings, possibly rumors, that North Korea may be doing a new nuclear test very soon. And again, people test their weapons. A test of a weapon is not in and of itself a provocation. But as North Korea moves forward with their missile program, and they're starting to show success, they tried to claim that last one was a failure, and I explained why it wasn't. But apparently the Pentagon is getting ready to test, yet again, their ICBM interceptor. And there's a little bit of a problem with it. It's not very good. In fact, it's only had 9 successful tests among the last 17. More about that when we come back after these commercials. Aloha America, welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about how the U.S. government is dusting off their ICBM interceptor now that North Korea has demonstrated an ICBM capability. And before I go into the specific details, little bit of a lesson in the terminology of long-range nuclear combat. The reason I know all of this is from many years ago when I was still doing some work for the government, but none of this is classified. Basically, planners for military operations will talk about a missile trajectory as consisting of 3 parts. The boost phase, which as the name implies, that's the period of flight while the engines are running and the missile is accelerating. Then there's the mid-course phase where it's simply following that nice predictable ballistic arc out in space. And then there's the terminal phase, which is when the warhead or warheads are guided to their eventual target. Now, most of the missile systems the U.S. has, like THAAD or Standard, are designed to deal with the terminal phase, close in. The U.S. only has one interceptor designed to hit an ICBM during that mid-course phase, and it's called the Ground-Based Mid-Course Defense System, and it's designed to counter missiles that are still way up, hopefully before they MERV. Once they MERV, your defensive problem has become much more complicated. The problem is this missile is considered the least reliable. It's a holdover from Reagan's Star Wars program, and it doesn't work very well. 9 successful tests among the 17. That means an enemy only has to fire twice as many warheads at us to get past it. That's not very encouraging and a good reason to not get into any more wars here. Okay, now little interesting footnote showed up. As you know, a lot of people in this country are concerned over the number of dual citizens who hold top government positions and are even members of Congress. And under U.S. law, it's legal for them to do that. But interestingly enough, in Israel, dual citizens are not allowed to serve in the Knesset, their version of the Congress. It's Israeli only. They don't want to run the risk that somebody has a loyalty that's divided someplace else. A very smart thing to do. But of course, if in this country you suggest that we should have an Americans-only policy in Congress, you're denounced as an anti-Semite. Now, while we're talking about the corporate media and their rather shameful record over the last couple of months, several years, decades, if you will, apparently over in Great Britain, the Times newspaper is attacking activists who are trying to sue on behalf of the victims of the Grenfell Tower disaster. And the spin they're putting on this is that they don't want to talk about the substandard plastic cladding that made it a fire trap. They don't want to talk about the absence of sprinkler systems. They don't want to talk about any of that stuff. They're attacking the activists, saying that they're working with Russia to incite class warfare in Great Britain. So if you're upset about Grenfell Tower, you must be a Russian asset. Now that's the shark. Actually, several sharks. But that's literally how they're trying to duck responsibility for the fact that it was the local government that allowed these substandard housing units to be built. And people died because of it. And people who survived are understandably upset. And so the Times turns around and says, well, the only reason you're upset is you're working for the Kremlin. It's amazing. Now then, turning to the domestic scene. Senator John Barrasso, Republican of Wyoming, is starting to crank up the heat on the Uranium One investigation. Given the zero coverage of Uranium One we're seeing in the corporate media, you may be forgiven for being surprised that there actually is one. But there is one. And Senator Barrasso is demanding documents from the Energy Department and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And he wants to find out if the Obama administration deliberately misled the Congress about Uranium One being allowed to export yellow cake uranium out of the United States after the company was acquired by Russia. So they're making progress on that one. Now, for those of you who don't remember, yellow cake uranium was also a big deal in the attempt to stir up the war against Iraq. And there was a claim that Iraq was importing yellow cake uranium from Niger, which was ridiculous because Iraq has plenty of natural uranium inside their own borders. They don't need to import it. The reason it was claimed they were importing it was to lay a paper trail to say, well, since Israel bombed Iraq's nuclear power plant, the only reason they could be importing uranium is they're building bombs. And, of course, it turned out the documents were forged, and there was a big stink there which led to the outing of Valerie Plame and all kinds of things with that. The reason it's called yellow cake is it is a very bright, pretty yellow. And as a matter of fact, before it was discovered that certain materials are radioactive and hazardous, uranium oxide was actually used as a pigment for paints, for ceramics, and as a matter of fact, you can still find them in antique stores. And of course, if you hold them up to a radiation meter, you will get a reading from those. Now, former Fox News host Bill O'Reilly is saying that given the assumed perceived success of the sexual smears against Judge Roy Moore, that Democrats are getting ready to try and do the same thing to Donald Trump starting next month, with an idea of just piling on so many sexual assault stories as to undermine his chances for success at re-election in 2020. I have to be brutally honest, even though I supported Trump in the last election, I don't think he's got a snowball's chance in the dark regions of being re-elected, because he has basically betrayed his supporters. But somebody seems afraid that he could actually win a re-election, and they're playing very, very dirty, which tells us who it is. It's almost like Hillary Clinton's defeat in last year's election turned on the valve. Excuse me, I got to sneeze. Like Hillary Clinton's defeat turned on the valve of sexual assault allegations as a political tool. We certainly saw it with Roy Moore, and now it's backflashing all over the place. And I got to tell you, it does remind me a lot of the rape hysteria during the 1990s. And that's why I'm not emphasizing these anymore. I've hit burnout. But Bill O'Reilly is saying there's going to be a massive campaign of finding women who are going to come on out and say that Donald Trump painted numbers all over their body or something like that. And again, to me, this tells me that Hillary's going to run in 2020. Now, over in San Francisco earlier today, their mayor, Ed Lee, who was the city's first Asian American mayor, passed away very suddenly. Apparently, he was in his office and he suffered a coronary. He was 65 years old. And he was basically appointed to serve as mayor when the remainder of Gavin Newsom's term, because he wasn't able to complete that as well. So apparently the Board of Supervisors President London Breed is now acting mayor of San Francisco effective immediately. And Breed becomes San Francisco's first female African-American mayor in any capacity. Now let's talk about the economy. Let's talk about globalization. And I think this next story illustrates that the bankers are most assuredly not concerned with the health of the country, the people. They just want what they want. They want to grab stuff. So apparently a year ago, Greece was forced to privatize one of their largest ports, the port of Piraeus. And this was a major source of revenue for the Greek government that they could use to retire their debt. But they were forced to privatize it, turn it over. It's now in the hands of the Chinese shipping company COSCO, which means all those port fees are not being spent to retire Greece's debt. They're just being used to enrich a corporation. And that seems to be a consistent pattern with all of this austerity. Take away the assets that might actually allow a country to pay its way out of the debt in order to make that debt slavery permanent. Because that's what private central banking is. It is a system of enslavement. It enslaves you to a sense of obligation to a debt that is manufactured for you. And it is a trap. Once you get stuck with private central banking, you can never get out unless you have a strong president like an Andrew Jackson who just pulls the plug on it and is willing to risk dying for it. Getting on back to Russia and its growing influence across the globe, Russia and Egypt have just signed an agreement for Russia to build a nuclear power plant in Egypt. Russia extended a loan to Egypt to cover the cost of construction. And so a spokesman for Rosatom said the plant, this will be Egypt's first, will be built in Daba'a in the north of the country, will be completed by 2022. And it will involve the building of a third-generation plant with 4 reactors. Well, that's going to make Israel very, very nervous. They're going to start screaming that Egypt is building bombs in the basement, because that's what they used as an excuse to destroy Iraq's nuclear power plant. Israel projects a lot on that issue. Israel has a bomb factory under their reactor at Dimona. Mordecai Benunu blew the whistle on it. Now that the story is out, Israeli TV actually did a documentary about it. But you're still not allowed to talk about it in the United States of America, or you're just being a Jew-hating anti-Semite. Now, they're still going around and around with the GOP tax plan. A lot of things, they're still trying to slip in some new stuff. They keep saying they're going to have a vote by the end of the year. Maybe, maybe not. But there's one little change they put on in there that is going to impact teachers. Now, if you're a teacher and you understand how school budgets are very, very tight, you can't get supplies, a lot of teachers will dip into their own pocket to get things for their students. And I know because when I was teaching remedial math back in Southern California, I did it too. The materials provided by the school district didn't engage the kids, so I went out and I just created some of my own. Current tax law allows teachers to deduct part of that money, and they're going to take that deduction away. Now, that will mean an additional $2 billion in revenues to the U.S. government, but it's going to mean even less school supplies for our students. You know what I'd like to see? I would like to see a nation in which the top priority for our tax money are the schools, and anytime the Pentagon wants to buy a new bomber, they're the ones selling brownies out in front of the local supermarket. That's what I'd like to see. Another article out here about Obamacare and why it was an absolute disaster. And it has to do with the high cost of health care and the cutoff point at which the Obamacare subsidies would kick on in. And basically said that the problem is people who are just above that poverty line are being hit with the full force of those medical bills. It would have been much fairer to have a sliding scale. And one of the reasons we have very expensive health care is because it's a for-profit model, and the other part of it has to do with the deals that the insurance companies make with the medical providers, which is they demand a discount. And so what the medical providers will do is they'll raise their prices so that the discounted price paid for by the insurance company actually pays for the medical care. But if you come into the emergency room and your insurance doesn't cover you, you're out of their system, you pay that full inflated price. The United States has the most expensive medical care on earth, and it's ranked something like 32nd in quality. There was a story somebody posted at whatreallyhappened.com. A young mother of 3 died of multiple cancers because her doctor said, "You're too young to have these cancers." There were indications, and the doctor said, "Nah, couldn't possibly be." Not very good. Story coming out of Sputnik News. Experts have been studying U.S. infrastructure for quite some time. As you know, there are concerns with certain dams that should have been reinforced long ago, cracks in the bridges, deteriorated rail systems, deteriorated roads. And basically, somebody tallied it all up and said that most of the United States of America's infrastructure dates all the way back to the 1950s. It hasn't been updated, it hasn't been replaced or renovated, and that's why it's all falling apart. Because all of our money is going to war and Israel and into the private pockets of the politically corrupt. And that's another reason why this tax plan is not going to bring jobs back to the United States of America. There's nothing to work with. The infrastructure to support renewed industry isn't there. And yesterday we had that story that these ADHD drugs they're giving to school kids actually impede their academic performance. We have high school classes graduating with a large percentage of the students can't even read. So where is the skilled labor force that somebody would need to start a new business here in the United States? I think we're past the point of no return. I think we're past the point of no return. All right, let's get on over to Europe and immigration. The head of Germany's domestic intelligence agency says the number of Islamic radicals is growing and becoming increasingly difficult to keep under surveillance as recruiting efforts move underground. Now, Hans-Georg Masson said in comments released Sunday the number of adherents of Salafist ideology rose to 10,800 from 9,700 a year ago. Salafists believe in a fundamentalist interpretation of Islam, though they are not necessarily violent. Well, there's another way to be looking at these numbers, and I'll explain when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're following up on this story where the head of Israel's domestic intelligence agency is saying the number of Islamic radicals in Germany is growing, and it's hard to keep tabs on all of them. And he says it's going underground. They've reduced street recruiting and radicalization in mosques and larger groups in favor of small conspiratorial circles, primarily on the Internet. And he sees this as a challenge. Well, that may not be the entirety of what's going on. First of all, anybody who's doing this kind of recruiting on the Internet, you have to wonder if maybe they're an agent provocateur, trying to lure in people so that they can identify them. And anybody who was really planning something violent probably wouldn't get sucked in on that. But there is a phenomenon. There are all these migrants who have flooded into Europe, flooded into the United States, and this also affects, to a lesser degree, the illegal immigrants as well. They've left behind everything they know. Everything that they grew up with, the familiar landmarks, familiar faces, familiar customs, and they're probably suffering an identity crisis. And they're looking for a new purpose in life, a new meaning, a new identity. And they made this trek across the globe with the expectation that they were going to find a good job and a new life and a new career that was going to be very fulfilling. And it didn't happen. And so we keep hearing about all these self-radicalized Islamics. And I think what's going on here is if there are no other options around them for any kind of emotional fulfillment or a feeling of self-pride, self-esteem, that they're going to basically go jihadi just so they feel like they still have a purpose in life. And I think that ought to be looked at as another aspect of the open borders policy that wasn't really thought through very clearly. Now, over in Germany, Merkel is thrashing around. She's trying desperately to avoid new elections, and she's trying to form a new coalition, and apparently she's running up head-to-head with the Social Democrats, and apparently the new slogan is GroKo, which is shorthand for the Grand Coalition. This is Merkel's proposal for a mega alliance of Merkel's conservatives and their own SPD Labor Party, and trying to basically put something together to say there's actually a functioning government. But everybody looks at it and says it doesn't matter what she does. It's going to be a minority government. The numbers just are not there. But apparently there's a lot of anger and friction within Germany's government over this issue. Now, you remember not too long ago how Catalonia started talking about becoming autonomous and independent from Spain. Well, that idea is starting to spread. Now, we're going to take a break for station identification, and when we come on back, I'll elucidate. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Sorry about the loud noise. I forgot the volume pot was still up there. So, not too long ago, Catalonia came on out and told the government of Spain, we want to go our own way. Historically, we used to be an independent country. That's generating a lot of friction. We're going to see what's happening with that. Now, Macron has the same problem because a nationalist coalition won a majority in the regional elections on the French island of Corsica. And they are now calling for President Macron to negotiate the island's independence. I could just see George Soros running all over the place with a big roll of duct tape trying to glue his European Union back together here. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, on Trump, he has just refilled him and Netanyahu like ISIS ranks, basically. I mean, people are angry, you know, like just he radicalized more. They radicalized more people by that stunt, you know.
They did
without him thinking, you know.
And
no strategy involved in with these people.
I'm beginning to think there wasn't really a strategy. I don't think they were expecting this backlash. I really think Netanyahu thought that if Trump went along recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital, most of the rest of the world would just follow the way they did Harry Truman. And, I mean, they couldn't have done more to destabilize the Middle East if they'd wanted to. And if they wanted to, they did an excellent job of it. And if they weren't expecting this, that betrays a certain degree of incompetence in foreign policy.
Remember that woman, Vanessa, I forgot her last name. She was the one in Syria investigating the white helmets and all the other groups. She was on RT about, you talked about this last week, about Adam Smith International, that front company.
Yes.
That was linked to the British government sending money to the jihadis through a rebel police force in Syria. But there's another two groups. One's linked to the, I forgot the name, linked to the white helmets, and there's another company. It's like a spider web of different fronts, you know, like linking to these different organizations, and they all traffic money and weapons to these different groups. You know, people need to watch that interview. It's on RT. It was only a few days ago. It was Vanessa something or other, and she was talking about how, like, you know, they got these, you know, Adam Smith International groups and all these other ones, which we knew about, but not to this, you know, I didn't expect it to be this many different groups linking to other groups, you know.
Well, they have a multiplicity of groups to try and conceal what it is that they're doing. To use a much more scaled-down example, of course, the Democrats going to a law firm who then in turn went to Fusion GPS, who then in turn went to Christopher Steele to gin up this bogus Russia dossier. And so, yeah, you'll have all these little cutouts to try and make it very hard to follow where the money's really going. But we know from documents that came out during the investigation into the email server, stuff that Judicial Watch got, that yes, the U.S. government was covertly supporting and supplying both ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria. And yes, that goes on a lot because they're trying to basically fight these wars using these proxy groups. In the awareness, both in Great Britain and the United States, the general public is tired of war. We've had enough. Okay, all right, so we'll just take all this money and we'll get these other groups to go fight our wars for us. And it was no secret that the vast majority of people who were fighting against Assad in Syria were hired mercenaries. 98% of the Free Syria Army were not even from Syria.
And Mike, also, don't forget, I just want to talk about the Syria, like Russia leaving. They're not leaving. They're only extra forces leaving. They're still going to be in those two bases over there.
Yes.
So if there's trouble, they'll be just pulling back into, the aircraft and stuff. But, that's why we're in debt. Partially is because we're overextended because you got too many people around. They're smart because they did their job. They leave. They don't. They're not going to stay there forever, having all those many troops and weapons and ships and all this other stuff. It's just a waste of money, So
I disagree. I disagree. I don't think that was Putin's motive. I think Putin's motive in pulling forces out of Syria was to send a message. The job is done. We're leaving, and so should the United States of America. And, of course, the U.S. has turned around and said, no, we're not going anywhere. We are here to stay. But getting on back to the immense cost of all this militarism around the globe, that is another parallel with the Soviet Union. And one of the aspects that came out of Reagan's Star Wars program was it goaded the Soviet Union into spending a lot more money on their weapons and led to basically the economic collapse of the entire system. And we're on that same path right now. The Pentagon is screaming for more money. There's no more money out here for them to have. And yes, the Federal Reserve can just create it out of thin air, but that puts downward pressure on the U.S. dollar internationally. So they're in a real corner on this.
You know who's still over in Syria is going to be Russian Special Forces, and there's some subs lurking out there. So they left, but they're not leaving. You know what I mean?
Like I said, it was more symbol than substance, and I think Putin was sending a message to the U.S. It's time for you to leave as well, but it didn't work. Yeah, it's like I said, they have to move their own. Like China and Russia's just got to go their own way. I mean, it's like no dealing with. You can't deal with it with us at this point. And Europe. Maybe France can be dealt with in Germany partially, but Britain and the United States they're never going to, just look at the Olympics. Well, you see, unfortunately, Russia and China cannot deal with the governments of Germany and France so much. Everything is now being routed through Brussels. They're talking about a United States of Europe with no national distinctions internally by 2025. Yeah, good luck with Brussels with those no-go zones. Thanks, Mike. Really. That's a big problem. Anything else? Have a good show. All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Getting on back to Europe, along with Catalonia and Corsica, apparently a British member of the European Parliament is urging Hungary to seriously consider breaking free from what he describes as EU tyranny. This is from UKIP member of the European Parliament, David Coburn. Now, voices are rising in Poland for the Polexit. They want out. And the Poles, I mean, look how long the EU has been around. There's been an entire generation now. And the Polish people are frustrated with the European Union. And they're saying it's time to end the economic bloc and for Poland to leave. The EU has not worked out for any of the member nations. It was supposed to be, originally, nothing more than a free trade, free travel bloc. That was it. That's what it was sold as. The European Union, we're going to have an outside border. Inside, you're not going to need visas or passports. You just can trade with each other. It's going to be wonderful. And bit by bit, over time, Brussels grabs more and more authority to itself. The European Union Parliament is a joke. It's symbolic. They can't actually pass any laws or do anything. The real power lies with the European Union Commission. It's just a handful of people that are making the decisions. And the people of Europe are not at all happy with it one tiny bit. Now, Merkel and Macron are in a bit of a conflict because France is pushing for the idea of a United States of Europe, and Germany, of course, sees themselves as being the preeminent power. So we could actually see a split there, where France and Germany both decide we've had it with this. But apparently German Foreign Minister Sigmar Gabriel is also supporting the initiative of the head of the Social Democratic Party, Martin Schulz, creation of the United States of Europe by 2025, and he's describing it as a nationality-free utopia. In other words, there won't be any nationalities in the EU. It's all going to be blurred and blended together. They're taking all those people from France and Italy and Sweden and Switzerland and Germany, along with all the Africans and the Middle Eastern Muslims. It's like a big giant blender, and they're going to hit puree. And they think that's going to lead to a utopia. If you think that, go up and take a look at what's going on up in Sweden, because it's not working out that way. Now, here is a very scary development. This is over at CBN.com. And apparently, the European Court of Human Rights is actually looking at a case that involves applying Sharia law to a disagreement between citizens of Greece who are Muslims. And so apparently Christian Coalition, a nonprofit organization based in London, intervened in the case because of the importance of the case in European law and its implications for countries across Europe. Now, of course, here in the United States of America, there is a wall between church and state. That's the reason for that portion of the First Amendment that says Congress shall make no law respecting an institution of religion. There's no official U.S. religion. No religion has civil authority. And that was crafted into our Constitution and the Bill of Rights because the Founding Fathers were only a few generations removed from the turmoil that gripped Great Britain in the conflict between the Catholics and the Protestants. And they didn't want that to threaten their new nation. But apparently over in Europe, they're actually considering that Sharia law might override the civil law. I think that would be a huge mistake for them to do that. Now, we mentioned earlier in the show this idea about the Olympics, and the corporate media made a big deal about the fact that Russia is banned from the Olympic Games. Well, the Russian Olympic Committee, Commission Chair, Sofia Valakaya, is saying the Russian Olympic team will be competing as individuals under a neutral flag. Apparently this took the U.S. a little bit by surprise, who thought Russia would just take their athletes and storm home in a tantrum. Now, it's interesting about this idea about a neutral flag because it implies there is already some kind of state of war between the U.S. and Russia. But basically, the IOC, the legal experts have pointed out, the original allegations of doping used by the International Olympic Committee to justify banning the entire team were found to be unsubstantiated in the final full report issued by the IOC in connection with its ban ruling. So here's what went down. The IOC had a preliminary report that says, we think the Russians are doping their athletes. Then they came on out and said, Russia is banned, and they issued the full report that said, we couldn't actually find any evidence of doping. And all of it goes back to that report from the World Anti-Doping Association, which was filled with ambiguities and for the most part based on a supposed confession from a Russian doctor. That was the entire case. But it looks like the Russians are going to be there, and it doesn't matter what uniform or flag they're wearing. Everybody's going to know they're Russians. There's another big stink that's building because apparently in one of the past Olympics there were allegations of doping by the American athletes. They tested positive for banned substances, but those test results were destroyed. And they gave the athletes a grace period. Come on back in a few days, we'll test you again. And I really hate to see the Olympics being politicized. I understand it's a political world, but I believe in a world of balance where there's a place for politics, there's a place for religion, there's a place for science, there's a place for art, there's a place for music, there's a place for athletics, and so forth and so on. But to allow politics to swell and just contaminate everything it touches, I think that deteriorates society as a whole. Now, I remember when I was a kid, you know, the Olympics were a big deal in the spirit of the original Olympics back in ancient Greece, which was when the Olympics are held, you stop the wars. You put down the weapons, you stop all the arguments, and you get together just to have the games. And they would have Olympic Games in Greece where soldiers on opposite sides of a war, ongoing war, would compete with each other. And then it was all over, they'd go back and presumably go back to warring. Or maybe not. Maybe they'd become friends and decide they'd had enough of that. That's what happened during the Christmas truce in World War I, if you remember that story. In fact, I think we're coming up on the anniversary of that. And that's where there was a truce declared for the Christmas holidays in the trenches of World War I. And the Germans and the British started shouting Christmas greetings at each other. They ventured out of the trenches. They had soccer games. They traded souvenirs. And when it was all over, most of them said, I don't want to shoot those guys. We're friends now. Now, we've been talking about this story for a while, and this is going to get really, really ugly. And it is a reminder that the police are not always good people. In fact, one of the drawbacks of the police forces is they tend to attract people who want to be police officers because they love the idea of the uniform and the badge and a gun and being able to boss people around. It does attract a certain psychology which is not always conducive to the best service to the public. So apparently we're looking at Baltimore and the death of Detective Sean Suter. And they're saying, how deep does the corruption go? And apparently, there's this scandal involving at least 8 officers of the Gun Trace Task Force who are accused of stealing money from residents, dealing drugs, and racketeering. Now, Detective Sean Suter was going to testify in the case, and he was found dead in an alley, shot in the head with his own gun. And originally the Baltimore police said, we'll take care of it, we'll investigate it. Now because of public outcry, they've turned around and the FBI is coming on in. Not that the FBI is necessarily any less corrupt. We saw that with TWA 800. We saw that with James Earl Ray. We saw that with Vince Foster. We saw that at Waco. We saw that at Oklahoma City, where when the low-level cover-up isn't working, you get the high-level cover-up artists to come on in. Meanwhile, out in San Joaquin, California, the chief autopsy doctor, the chief pathologist, has resigned and basically has gone public blowing the whistle, saying that he chose to resign because he no longer wanted to stand by and watch the sheriff change the findings from death investigations in order to protect law enforcement. So this former chief forensic pathologist, Dr. Bennett Omalu, claimed that when he was conducting autopsies on individuals who were killed by police officers, Sheriff Coroner Steve Moore attempted to influence the medical findings. This was reported by KQED News. In some cases, the reports were changed from homicide to accidental death. We are a hopelessly corrupt society. And speaking of corruption and entanglements, there's a story just now breaking. You remember that Department of Justice official was demoted over the Trump dossier case? Well, it turns out his wife worked for Fusion GPS. Little conflict of interest there. And it gets even better than that. She also worked for the Central Intelligence Agency, which raises a question. Is Fusion GPS one of the too many to be counted CIA front groups? And there are a lot of them. So, when we come on back from this next commercial break, we're going to talk a little bit about computers, about global warming, and so forth. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And once again, that address is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. And again, I am daring everybody who listens to this broadcast, podcast, YouTube replay, Part 15 radio broadcasters, send in $5. Just $5. And if you don't, you got to stick your fingers in your ears and stop listening, because we really do need your help. All right, getting on back here to the news. And by the way, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. There's been a new development coming from Representative Bod Goodlatte, Republican of Virginia. And he wants to change the laws regarding posting online, where anybody who posts or hosts an ad that leads to any kind of sexual interaction is going to get prison time. And this is bad news, obviously, for sex workers who advertise online. But it also leaves digital platforms like dating apps, social media, and classified sites such as Craigslist open to serious legal liability for the things users post. And this will give government agents more incentive and authority to monitor sex-related apps, ads, forums, and so forth and so on, and would also incentivize platforms to track and regulate user speech more closely. Now, this was offered as an amendment to another House bill, this one from Missouri Republican Ann Wagner, and the House Judiciary Committee will consider both bills on Tuesday. Now, up until recently, the law has been that the operator of any online site, such as whatreallyhappened.com, is not legally liable for anything criminally posted to their site, like copyright violations and so forth. But they're trying to switch that around to force websites, online social media, to do the government's job of censorship for them. Because it's going to start with the sex industry, but it probably will not stop there. But Wagner's bill would amend Section 230 of the Federal Communications Decency Act, which says websites and other online platforms should not be treated as the creators of user-posted content. That's the way it works right now. If I'm running a blog, I'm not legally the creator of things that are put on there from other sources. I'm the creator of the original content, obviously. But this is a serious, serious problem, and it's going to have repercussions to the online industry. And I'm sure it's going to make the moralists happy. Now, I'll be very honest. I think Las Vegas, other parts of Nevada, had the right idea. I think prostitution should be legalized. It's going to happen anyway. And you can regulate it, you can tax it, but more importantly, you can enforce health standards. And that's something that you don't get the way things currently are. So I know the moralists are going to be outraged at that idea, but I think there comes a time where you have to say, what's pragmatic? What's expedient? What is going to work to actually solve the problem? All right, let's talk about human-caused global warming. The Old Farmer's Almanac was right. Late in coming, but boy, has it hit. Heavy snow is blanketing northern Europe. All kinds of flight cancellations, delays at Schiphol Airport in the Netherlands, Brussels Airport. 400 flights were canceled at Schiphol, one of the biggest airports in Europe. Same thing down in Frankfurt, 200 in Brussels. Travelers are being advised to check flight updates at home rather than set off for the airport in bad weather. A lot of car crashes in Germany, train delays. Boy, remember back in March of 2000, snowfalls are a thing of the past. It's also hitting in Great Britain. Sunday, Storm Carolyn, the biggest storm so far this year. Widespread disruption of road and air travel severely affected. Temperatures plummeting. Central England and Wales were the worst hit regions with 11 inches of snow in just a few hours. Northern Ireland was also slammed. So it's definitely there. And it's actually been unseasonably cold here in Hawaii. I know you're going to say, oh, I feel so bad for you. You're in Hawaii. You're only down into the 50s. My heart bleeds for you. Well, yeah, but when you're used to the normal Hawaii weather, it does feel chilly. Of course, when it gets that cold, Claire snuggles up to me a little more closely, and so there's an upside to this thing. Meanwhile, here in the United States, unusually early, heavy snow, that's their description, not mine, creates a winter wonderland from Texas to Georgia. It's down there in the deep south, into areas that normally don't get snow. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to go ahead and take a phone call here from Ramsey in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
So, sir, I have a question regarding what you said in the first hour. You said that in 1972, the games that took place in Munich, Germany, the Israeli athletes who got killed by the PLO, you said that was a false flag?
Yes.
So the Palestinians and the PLO or the Liberation Army or whatever, they never did that?
Well, we don't know who really did it, but they claim to be the Palestinian Liberation Organization. That's the essence of the false flag. But years later, it came on out that the terrorist mastermind, and it was the same guy that threw that guy in the wheelchair off the cruise ship. But it turned out he was working for Mossad. British intelligence revealed that Israel arranged the hijacking that led to the raid on Entebbe. To basically, make the world think that the Palestinians were nothing but terrorists, and Israel was perfectly justified in taking their country away from them. Abu Nidal, that's the guy, I think.
What's his name, sorry?
If I recall correctly, the double agent's name was Abu Nidal, and he was supposed to be this terror mastermind for Palestine, but it came out years later he was working for Mossad. By way of deception, thou shalt do war.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Fred in Nova Scotia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. How are you doing today?
You're doing fine.
That's good. I have a story for you.
Okay.
If you got a second.
Yes.
I befriended a comedian online. I'm not a friend of his, but I liked him. And I made a joke about the artist Rihanna. I'm sure you're familiar with her.
Yes.
I don't know. Anyways, she's been putting so much makeup on her face that she looks orange, and her hair looks kind of greenish.
Okay.
So the article was, is Rihanna the most beautiful woman in the world? My comment was simply, she would be if she didn't look so much like the Who people. That was my comment. Yes, exactly my intentions. It was a joke. I meant to make it. I'm a comedian in my own mind. I'm a comedian, I guess.
Yes.
No, not professionally, but whatever. A lady sent me a message, and I would, if I had a second, I would read it to you. But basically, she was insulting my wife. She said if I had a beautiful wife and not this ungodly or unholy beast that I have, and I'm sure as a married man yourself, you can understand that how I would feel by that reaction.
Yes.
I was trying to make a joke, and this woman insults my wife by saying she's not as beautiful as this black woman that I insulted. Okay? And I'm sure you can, based on that comment, you can see where I'm getting to.
Yes.
Okay? So she tells me, and she berates, like completely insults me. So I reply with a few, nice words, let's say, and I send her a message. Why are you saying this to my wife, along with the C word? Okay. And then she just goes off on me.
Well, you obviously met a snowflake, one of the first snowflakes of this winter probably, and you triggered her off. And unfortunately, the snowflakes seem to feel that there's a double standard. You can't say anything negative about them, but they can certainly come back and say all of the negative things they want about you. And that's just the way the universe is supposed to operate. But I understand about off-the-cuff comments. I remember several years ago, I got into serious trouble involving a young lady. This was back when the fashion was to have jeans outfits that had holes in them and tears and all the and people were paying huge amounts of money to get these pre-made torn-up outfits that they were wearing. And I remember this girl was modeling it for us in the office and said, how do I look? And the first thing that popped out of my mouth is like you survived an industrial accident. And that did not go over very well.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess that's the thing about comedy. You know, it's either you hit or miss or you hit, right? And I mean, it was like I said, it was just a comedic comment. So she wrote a 1-star review. I own a small business here. It's a restaurant. She wrote it's the only 1-star review that I've ever gotten. And she wrote a 1-star review along with the message, do you condone your business owner saying the C word to females? This and this. And I'm like, and then I wrote the comment that she wrote, and I said, I'm sorry, but saying this to my wife is C word worthy. You know, like, and you know, like, unfortunately, and the worst thing is, she berated me because she thought I was a white male, and I'm Lebanese. I just look pale. So I'm going to have to let you go. As you can hear, I have a phone call.
Okay, well, go get the phone call, and we'll get on back to the news here. Thank you very much for the phone call. All right. One of the downsides of online reviews for businesses is that people can use them to exact a personal revenge. And it would be nice if there were some kind of a mechanism to correct that, because history has shown that if people think they can attack you by any means with impunity, that they can go on out and lie about you and nothing bad will happen, they're more inclined to do it. So in a nation where we've lost our moral compass, we see that happening more and more often. Breaking story here. This is coming out of the Still report. And it turns out Bill O'Reilly was right. They're getting ready to come after Donald Trump with another sexual assault allegation. And apparently this woman is named Summer Zervo. She was a contestant on The Apprentice in 2005. And apparently she just showed up in New York City with attorney Gloria Allred, who is so crooked she makes Hillary Clinton look like an honest individual. Gloria was also representing Beverly Nelson during that whole debacle over the yearbook inscription, which turned out to be something other than what it was supposed to be. So anyway, Allred is out there, and Zervos is claiming that Trump kissed her 12 years ago on the lips without her consent twice. And, of course, you would think that would be worth a good slap in the face, unless the woman was there to get something. And she's already admitted she approached Trump to get a job. So she was after him. And, of course, there's absolutely no support for the claim that he kissed her. But if he did, if she had kissed back, she'd be First Lady of the United States of America now. Maybe that's why she wants to sue. Anyway, according to Still, somebody has come up with $10,000 for this woman to pay her expenses as she goes through this. Anyway, so apparently Trump, of course, has denied that this happened. And Zervos is taking that denial and is suing President Trump for defamation. So, boy, talk about politics being a dirty business. Alrighty, getting on back to human-caused global warming, and the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Let's get some calls in here. So we're talking about the winter wonderland from Texas to Georgia, and it is snowing very heavily. In southeastern Texas, 7 inches of snow was reported on the south side of Corpus Christi, Texas. They also had thunder snow, which is a snowstorm, obviously with lightning. And according to the Corpus Christi Caller Times, the last accumulating snowfall in the city was all the way back in 2004. Now, according to AccuWeather, it may not stop snowing in northern Pennsylvania until next week. So it's major. There's another Arctic blast heading that way. They're still looking to the lake effect snow in south central Pennsylvania. And they're just saying it's a very snowy pattern. Well, golly gee. Looks like we are headed into a new Maunder minimum and a new mini ice age. And that wailing in the distance that you hear is Al Gore, whose film, An Inconvenient Sequel, apparently did not do all that well. Now, France is still fully on board with the Paris Accord, and Macron is getting ready to issue all expenses paid grants for U.S. climatologists who are on board with the global warming agenda to relocate to France. This is part of Macron's attack on Trump's climate policies. Now, not too long ago, there was a video that came on out of an emaciated polar bear rummaging through the garbage in search of food. Oh, it's a starving polar bear. It's all because of global warming, and the video went viral all over the place. And people who actually live up there are saying this is normal. Yes, there are very well-fed polar bears up there, but if a polar bear becomes injured, if they wound their paw, then they can't get food, and yes, they will be starving. It's a normal part of Mother Nature, and it is not due to global warming. Now, the overall population of polar bears has been increasing, so they're not endangered. In fact, they've recently been reclassified a pest animal. It's okay to hunt them again. Now, you remember some years ago when they were trying to push this whole poor polar bears are drowning, they had this picture of a polar bear on this little bit of ice in blue water and said, see, the Arctic ice is melting, the poor polar bear is about to drown. And then it came on out that the photo was actually from the summer melt season when you're supposed to get melting ice, along with the fact that polar bears don't drown. Their fur is actually hollow. That's why it's white, and it provides extra thermal insulation because of that airspace in the middle. It's also buoyant. Polar bears can actually sleep while floating, and they have been documented as swimming as much as 60 miles. So it was all based on lies. And if you go and read my ClimateGate article, you will see down at the very bottom a whole bunch of quotes from the luminaries of the global warming movement about how it's okay to lie. It's okay to scare people to go along with our agenda. And no, in point of fact, it is not. Because as the lies become exposed, your agenda becomes discredited. Now, there have been a couple of incidents over in Europe which are going to make the winter even worse. And it has to do with the fact that over in Austria, there was a huge explosion at the Baumgarten oil facility, one of the continent's biggest supply hubs. Not just the biggest in Austria, biggest in Europe, one of the biggest in Europe. And it's blown up, huge amount of damage, and it's already causing shortages. And price for gas and oil already soaring upward. Italy has already declared a state of emergency as a result of the fuel shortage. And complicating it even further is a North Sea pipeline has had to shut down for repair work. And that's going to put upward pressure on prices and downward pressure on available supplies. Now, this pipeline, the Forties pipeline system, supplies nearly 40% of the oil and gas to that part of Great Britain. So if the Arab League wanted to hit the West with an oil embargo over Jerusalem, this would be the perfect time for them to do it. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Ron in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. You might have covered this already. I don't know. Have you heard any scuttlebutt about any kind of credible theories about the start of these wildfires in California?
Well, I've heard a lot of speculation. I don't think anybody is really certain one way or the other. I do know that one of the big problems when the winds are really blowing is the homeless will start a fire to cook their food or to stay warm. The embers will start blowing, and that will be it. I remember when Claire and I were still living in Southern California, there was a huge fire up in the San Gabriel Mountains, turned the entire sky orange overhead, and that one began with a homeless campfire.
Could be as simple as that, I guess.
Yes.
But I thought maybe you might know something more. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually going to be the correct one. And again, people could have just thrown a lit cigarette out of the car window. When the wind is blowing that hard, cigarettes won't go out as they travel down to the ground because the wind is fanning the flame. So you have to be really, really careful.
Was there about 5 or 6 fires, though?
The numbers keep changing because the embers will like blow forward and start a new fire. But I think there's 6 major ones and probably a lot of little small hot spots they're trying to deal with.
I appreciate it. I love your show, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. This specific series of fires is the 5th worst in California history. This year has been the worst wildfire year in all of California history. And again, in the present case, a lot of it has to do with the wind. A lot of it has to do with allowing the dead overburden to increase and grow because funds for clearing brush and keeping the fire breaks open have been cut back. So it's a confluence of different causes, and all it takes is an initiating event like a homeless fire, and you've got a disaster on your hands. I remember some years ago there was a case where they had come to realize that not allowing forest fires in Yellowstone was building up dangerous brush, so they decided to do some controlled burns. Just burn down the overburden bit by bit. One of those fires got out of control. So, got to be very, very careful about that. Now then, going to start on a story. We're going to have to take it through the commercial break here. And we mentioned it earlier in the program with that caller who wanted to know if their little group on healthy natural eating might have been infiltrated. And apparently it's big business. And we're not talking about FBI, CIA, NSA. We're talking about corporate espionage who will be hired by large companies to basically infiltrate and spy on any groups that they see might be a threat to their business. And when we come on back from this next commercial break here, we'll give you some more information about that. So stay tuned. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're talking about corporate intelligence and how large companies will hire these corporate intelligence firms to spy on and infiltrate and, who knows, possibly try and disrupt and sabotage any groups that are a threat to their profit, their bottom line. And apparently British Airways, Royal Bank of Scotland, and Porsche are among companies that have been identified as having done this, paid corporate intelligence firms to monitor political groups. And this included the use of infiltrators to spy on campaigners. And apparently at one point they targeted the family of Rachel Corrie, who was the student protester crushed to death by a bulldozer. They're targeting environmental groups, campaigners protesting about phone masts, I would imagine that they're probably targeting people concerned about the safety of GMO food and vaccines. And this is very, very serious because in many cases, as the FBI did during COINTELPRO in the 1960s, these are violations of the law. So if you're part of a group like that caller who called on in, and all of a sudden the group seems to be losing its focus, there's a lot of arguing, internal strife, yes, you may have been infiltrated. And it isn't necessarily liberals, it isn't necessarily the FBI or the CIA. It could be one of these corporate intelligence outfits. Because these large corporations, they love their profits. And they don't want anybody upsetting business, even if they are selling bad products, apparently. And apparently police chiefs across the country are very concerned that these activities of these corporate intelligence firms are barely regulated and completely uncontrolled. So, now, getting on back to the fires here, apparently the Thomas fire has exploded in size, threatening new areas. We've got rain coming down here. I wish I could crate it up and send it over Southern California because they could really use that. Now, last week we were talking about some interesting research that had come on out involving what's called genetic extinction. And supposedly the company that was doing this was working on a project where they were going to release some kind of a pathogen or parasite that was DNA selective, and it was targeted on the mosquito that carries malaria. Well, sounds like a very noble thing to do. But unfortunately, it has since come on out, this research is being conducted by DARPA, the Advanced Research Project Agency. These are the blue sky guys who are coming up with the truly science fiction stuff. And there is a concern here, and I'll tell you what it is after station identification. And aloha America, welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're talking about this genetic extinction research. And when it first broke into the news, it was basically said that the purpose of the project was to exterminate the malaria mosquito, which sounds like a real good thing to do. Then we find out that this research is being funded by the Defense Department's Advanced Research Projects Agency. And they're the blue sky people. They're on the cutting edge of what can we turn into a weapon. And a lot of people are very concerned that this technology that is being developed and funded by DARPA is being done so for military purposes. Biological weapons that basically select their targets based on DNA. And this is of concern, of course, to the Russians because of the other story that came out a couple of weeks ago, how the U.S. has been trying to obtain samples of Russian DNA from all the various subgroups that make up the Russian people. Now, the story about the mosquitoes is also questionable because if you get rid of those mosquitoes, it doesn't eradicate the bacteria that causes malaria. The bacteria will probably just find another vector. So it looks like something really nasty is coming on. All right, I did a quick look on the fire map for California, and it looks like there are 10 distinct blazes reaching from almost to Santa Barbara in the north, out to San Bernardino in the east, and down to the Cleveland National Forest, down towards San Diego. So that's really getting ugly. Let's take some phone calls. Terry in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I apologize for calling you for something so trivial in advance, but you gave us a challenge of $5 a piece, right?
Right.
This morning?
Yes.
Can I call a phone number and just give them a credit card over the phone?
Yes, you can, and the number is 800-724-2719, extension 03.
Okay, another thing on these ads where you're looking for a monthly donation, you had one ad that started at $20 a month, 30, and then went on all the way up to 100 something. And then you came out with a new one starting at $30 a month. I'll tell you, Mike, I'm on Social Security, and I got a little Veterans VA thing from Vietnam, and I can give you $10 a month. I apologize for
that will certainly help. And again, what makes it very, very hard for us to have to do a beg is we understand all of you out there are struggling financially the same way that we are. And as far as my $5 dare, that's a one-time only deal. But if you want to be a recurring subscriber, I'm sure anything that you're able to donate will be gratefully accepted.
Okay, well, how do I do that? Get on the website?
Again, you can call that number, and they'll answer all your questions, or you can go to the website as well, republicbroadcasting.org.
Right. Okay, Mike, thank you very much. I got to let you go because I got a phone call to make here.
Okay, I'm sorry. Terry, that's extension 1 that you need to do. I was told it was extension 3, but I've just been corrected. It's extension 01. Oh, boy, I didn't know that one.
01.
Okay.
It's 800-724-2719.
Extension 1 for the recurring donations, and we'll get a clarification on that other number. But, yeah, anything that you can do would really help.
Okay, the recurring is 01, so what's the $5 challenge? I got to do that one, too, because you challenge.
Well, I'm sure that Julie will help you with that as well. I was thinking more along the line of, check in the mail.
Oh, no, that's the Round Rock, Texas. It's easier just to, give her a credit card.
Okay, well, call that number. Julie's waiting to hear from you. And thank you very much for your generous support.
I'll call her now. Thank you. Bye.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Lenny in Los Angeles. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, Trump is on my mind, and these quote-unquote new allegations, you could see this coming from a long time ago when so-called Bush did the interview with Trump and got Trump on tape. They thought that would crush him and make him step down. Wasn't strong enough. Okay, so now they've come with this huge wave of what I call the mimetic effect. And they sacrificed the likes of Weinstein and everybody else that they could sacrifice. Even though Conyers is accused, he's trying to put his son in the seat. Al Franken said he would step down, but he's not really going anywhere. You see, they set all this up to put all this pressure on his SMA, okay, to quit and give up. I just hope that for his sake, he's strong enough to tell them all to screw off.
Well, I certainly hope so.
My first comment.
We need to basically underscore the fact that there is a double standard going on here, because if you will remember back when Obama was campaigning, there was a video. In fact, I'm looking at it right now. I'm about ready to post it to the website, where he was basically walking around the campaign airplane with an erection and showing it off. Hey, look at me. And, I can't imagine that the females on that plane were particularly comfortable with that, but nobody made a big deal about it.
Right. Personally, I think he was trying to prove his own manhood, but that's another subject. But I also have a couple other points I want to cover because it's been a while since I called in. Saakashvili over in Ukraine. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to use him to usurp Poroshenko. And they're trying to usurp him to get him out. Now, notice Saakashvili is not even a Ukrainian. He's from Georgia.
Yes.
Okay? And they're trying to usurp Poroshenko because he has enough sense not to attack Russia. But I think that Saakashvili, given what he did to South Ossetia and Odessa when he was president of Georgia, he's stupid enough to give it a try, quote-unquote, for the New World Order, just to eat another necktie on their behalf. Okay? The other thing is Trump declaring Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel. I don't know, who died and made him God. Okay, because, just because he declares it don't make it true. It sure is going to happen. I read just recently here, Malaysia is even offering to step in and fight for Palestine.
Yes.
They have to. So see what a hornet's nest they've kicked up there. But, in terms of what you were saying earlier, what were they thinking? I think they were thinking that the Palestinians have no hope and they would just give up. But it's done the opposite. It has the opposite effect, not only with the Palestinians, but the rest of the world. The rest of the world has stood up and said they're just sick of it. And what I've learned about the likes of Netanyahu and his ilk is that they really don't give a damn what anybody thinks. Then they got the nerve to turn around and get mad when somebody thinks. That's just been their attitude as a whole. I'm sorry just to take up so much time, but I had so much I wanted to say.
Well, again, I think that Netanyahu was not expecting this backlash, and neither was Trump. I think Netanyahu was thinking it was going to be a replay of the founding of Israel itself. The president says it's okay, and the rest of the world goes along. But the United States is not the leader of the world anymore, and hasn't been for quite some time. And that's why these other countries are out there saying, just because Donald Trump recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, it doesn't really change the legal status of the city. And no, we're not going along with it just because Trump said so.
I agree 100%. I did send in my $5, by the way.
All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And thank you for your generosity. We're going to switch over to Mo in Florida. Aloha, Mo. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
I've been away for a while, so I hope I'm not. I bet we're coming up on a break, right?
No, we got about 10 minutes to go here.
Oh, good. I'll just say my point here as brief as I can, and you've already covered it. I apologize because, like I said, I've been out of town, and I've been away from computers and everything. But I missed your show, and yes, I'm going to donate too. I'm going to donate again. And I understand the whole thing. You really say it like it is. But I know your whole paradigm, whatever we're talking about. I caught the program we were talking about the diseases and stuff. But I know that your whole your basis is about the money, the ink and paper. And my question to you is, and if you already covered this, like I said, I apologize if it's redundant. But I think what they're doing, they're getting everybody into this cryptocurrency. Then they're going to collapse it. And they're going to have their own cryptocurrency, a la the 2018 Economist magazine, where they're going to have the government cryptocurrency. Then they can charge you negative interest rates, and everybody. And we're just so close to that Aaron Russo chip thing that that's scary. I got goosebumps just thinking about it. Mike, this is exactly what's happening. I saw Aaron Russo when that came out. Before he died, and
yes.
He was. Remember he said, Rockefeller said they're going to have everybody chipped. How else can they go negative interest rates? Unless once they get these sheep, and hey, listen, this has been tough for me. I'm a stacker. To see this cryptocurrency, and I'm one of the first ones that called in about it. When it first came out.
Yes.
And I just think that's what they're doing. You talk about your ink and paper. Now it's digital. They got you online. And look at how you go on CNBC. I'm sorry if I'm running off here because to watch history happening, and you finally see it, and you see CNBC, everybody's bragging it up. They're not talking down cryptocurrency. They talk down gold. They talk down silver. They talk down, other investments maybe, but mostly cryptocurrency is wonderful. Everybody jump in, and then they're going to collapse the heck out of it. People are going to panic, but they're already used to digital. Yeah, some will go into gold and silver, but I think a lot of them are going to jump into the SDR, whatever that medallion they had on the Economist magazine. So I'll just wait for your response.
Well, my first response is that the current run-up on Bitcoin is looking more and more like a pump and dump. And it came on out that apparently 40% of the Bitcoins that are out there in circulation are owned by just 1,000 people. So it's already being hoarded and monopolized. And the classic bump and dump pattern is that the people who've got these huge positions are able to stimulate a buying frenzy. And then when it gets close to the top, these 1,000 individuals will dump their Bitcoin holdings. They'll get huge amounts of money, the other kind for it, and everybody else is going to be left with virtually nothing. And it's a type of investment fraud. And the problem I've always had with cryptocurrency is it is just another virtual currency. It's got nothing behind it whatsoever. The fact that it's digital doesn't really mean all that much versus the ink and paper stuff, which is also a virtual currency. There's no commodity base to either one.
I totally, you've been right all along, Mike. I mean, you're right about the whole thing. But I mean, the end result is if they collapse this cryptocurrency, get everybody in on it, and people are going to be devastated. People are mortgaging their homes to buy these invisible ether.
Mistake.
What are they going to do? What are they going to do, Michael, when it collapses? They're going to go running. There's no FDIC insurance. They're going to panic. And the government's going to say, here we are. We have the digital currency that you need, and now we can do whatever. We can shut you off. It's just the next step between being chipped, right?
Well, they don't even need to come up with an alternative digital currency because if you really think about it, even the Federal Reserve note, for the most part, is a digital currency. The actual ink and paper notes in circulation are just a tiny fraction of the U.S. dollars that are floating through the economy. Most of them are already residing in computers of one form or another. A collapse of Bitcoin is going to drive people back into using the Federal Reserve note, which is exactly what the Federal Reserve wants. So, again, I understand everybody's enthusiasm about cryptocurrency, but I'm getting a strong smell of tulips here.
I agree, and I'll let you go, Mike. I mean, you let me go, whatever. But I think they developed this. DARPA, the NSA developed this thing, and they're going to herd everybody in, and then when they collapse it, they're going to go into the government cryptocurrency. And that's what people run into, like lemmings, and then they got you. The next step is your chip, baby. Thanks, Mike. I love you, man. Say hello to Claire. I hope you're all doing great, and you got the best show out there. Thank you.
Well, thanks an awful lot for your kind words and your information. But again, there's too much volatility on Bitcoin right now. It looks like a pump and dump to me. Now, I'm not a financial planner. I'm not an economic expert. If you look at my bank account, you'll understand that to be the absolute fact. But again, there's no commodity base. There's nothing with which to have a foundation of value for Bitcoin. And one of the reasons that's true is it takes a lot of computer processing to generate or mine a Bitcoin, but there's no way to convert that Bitcoin back to all of that computer processor activity. It's a one-way process. And that, I think, is one of the reasons it may be very unstable. We're going to do a shout-out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And generally, as part of our diets, Claire and I avoid fast food. But every once in a while, circumstances, we'll just say, we're just going to go through a drive-through because we can't get home and we're in a hurry. And Claire was asking me the other day, looking at the price of the burgers, where are they sourcing the raw material from that they can sell this at the price and still make a profit. And there's a very alarming story that showed up in Before It's News. Apparently there was a study, was published in the journal Annals of Diagnostic Pathology. And apparently the scientists went on out and they got samples of the hamburger meat from 8 large fast food chains. They wouldn't say which chains, which I wish they had, but they found out that the 100% all beef patties being advertised are not in fact all beef. See, what's been going on in this country is we've transitioned away from where words like beef and tuna actually describe the content of what's in the can or the bun. And it's used merely as a trademark or a branding label. When you go to the supermarket and you get a can of tuna, or that's labeled tuna, there can be any one of a dozen species of fish that are in there. when you go to the store and you get a bottle that's labeled honey, that might not be real honey from the rear end of a honeybee in there. It might be a sugar and artificial flavor concoction. But these companies are allowed to do this, and so they do. So this study that came out in the Annals of Diagnostic Pathology basically found that the actual meat content of these burger patties ranged from a high of 12% down to a low of just 2%. And the rest were a variety of fillers, no nutrition to them. In some cases, in 2 of the cases, they actually found parasites in the meat, which is another reason why I wish they'd been forthcoming with the names of the chains. And unfortunately, the same thing is probably going on with processed packaged meats at your supermarket. And I can understand the reason why the government is going along with this. Between Fukushima, the Gulf oil disaster, the GMO disaster, there simply isn't enough safe, healthy food to feed the human population. And so we're going into an era where anything that will fill our stomach and make a profit is what we're being fed. And if you have never seen the movie Soylent Green, now might be a good time to hunt it on down. Charlton Heston starred in it. Edward G. Robinson was the best movie he made after he came back from his blacklisting. And it seems like we're headed that way, into a world of totally synthetic, laboratory-based food. I also remember the opening of Judge Dredd, where they had this robot advertiser, eat recycled food, it's good for the environment, and it's okay for you, which I thought was very humorous. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And as long as we're on the subject of Bitcoin, apparently over in the Chicago Board Options Exchange, they have a new product, a Bitcoin future. In other words, in addition to just investing in Bitcoins, buying them, mining them, whatever, you can now buy futures contracts on Bitcoin. You can bet on the price going up, or you can try and short sell and bet on the price going down. And this is just going to magnify the problems if this thing does turn out to be a speculative bubble, which even this article is saying. People are saying this is a speculative bubble. It's tulip season. And that's the problem with derivatives. And going long or going short is a very simple form of derivative, but they can take a crisis situation in investing and they can magnify the devastation. Derivatives can make you insanely rich when the market or the Bitcoin is going up, and they can absolutely wipe you out on the reverse. So apparently people are already hopping on board this, and the Chicago Board Options Exchange had to halt trading twice through so-called circuit breakers, and they admitted their computer servers were straining under the load of people coming on in and buying these futures contracts. As you know, at a suggestion from one of my listeners, we did put up a Bitcoin donor button at our website, and so far we have 0.002 Bitcoins, for which I'm very grateful. I still don't know what to do with them, but they're out there. Now, pesticides, neonicotinoids, are back in the news again. And this is one of the suspects in the collapse of the honeybees, colony collapse disorder. Other suspects are GMO pollen. And apparently the neonicotinoids have been found to have another problem. Birds who are ingesting this chemical are losing their sense of direction. They're getting lost up in the sky. Now, birds have been found to navigate through obvious awareness of the geography below. Some birds have a magnetic sense, a built-in compass. And by the way, so do some humans. That's the expression of following your nose. It's just knowing where north automatically is. Some birds have been demonstrated to actually follow the stars. They'll put these birds in a planetarium, and they'll put the sky up there, and the birds will orient a certain way, and they'll turn the projector around, and the birds will basically reorient with that. But if these sprays are harming these birds and making them lose their way, they could fly out to sea and they could die. Now, the European Commission has proposed a ban on three neonicotinoids on flowering crops such as oilseed rape because of the threat to bee health. Britain originally opposed that, but now they're having to go back and take another look at that because of the harm to benevolent bird species. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Actually, we're going to start the phone call. I'm probably going to have to take you into the next segment. Rick in Arizona, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I was thinking about the market at 24,000, 25,000 in Bitcoin. You know, I'm almost sure that all these fund managers are in a webinar every morning and they are told not to sell. If there ever was a time to make a bunch of money by, you know, going short and selling out, this is it. And it doesn't seem like anybody's selling. Eustace Mullins once said that somebody called in and said, how can they keep this, you know, shell game going? And Eustace said, as long as they got the shell.
Yes.
I don't know. It's a speculative bubble, but unless they want it to come down, I don't think anybody's going to lose any money.
So the problem I have, especially now that they're trading futures on it, is that a lot of people could get hurt even without Bitcoin itself necessarily losing a great deal. Like I was saying before, the derivatives are going to cause a lot more damage. But first of all, there's really not much that that supports the value of Bitcoin other than the perception of high demand. And people are, in fact, buying Bitcoins with the expectation they're going to sell them down the road for more money. But if nobody is really selling, if, in fact, 40% of the current Bitcoins are held by just 1,000 people, clearly they are hoarding them for a specific purpose, and I think it's a bump and dump. And this futures trading in Chicago is only going to make it a lot worse when it happens.
Yeah. I just want to make one other quick comment, hopefully. You know, Ben Gurion said that Pakistan was Israel's biggest enemy. Pakistan became a country, you know, the same year Israel did.
Yes.
And it was Pakistan that supplied the pilots to the Syrian Air Force back in both of those wars. So I'm kind of thinking that every time they talk about Iran, they really mean Pakistan.
Can you hold here, Rick, we got to take a break for commercials. I'm going to come right back to you after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Rick in Arizona, and you were talking about how at one point Israel thought Pakistan was their worst enemy.
Yeah, I mean, Ben Gurion made those comments years ago, and, you know, they're an Islamic country, and the propaganda says they have nuclear weapons. I mean, I think that the word Iran is just, you know, code for Pakistan. And they're not going to keep telling us what's really going on, but I think Pakistan is Israel's number one worry. And they provide the pilots to the Syrian army in both those wars, and those Pakistani pilots knocked them out of the air in both wars. You know?
Yeah.
So I'm just, you know, I just don't see Iran as a threat, and nobody else does either. But we constantly keep hearing about how Iran is going to kill all the Jews, but the largest, you know, concentration of Jews other than Israel is happily living in Iran.
And they're very comfortable there. Yeah. So they're very comfortable. They're very happy there. They rejected an effort by Israel to lure them to emigrate because they are very comfortable there in Iran. And obviously, if Iran were out to get all the Jews, like Netanyahu's back to screaming that this week, Iran is the new Nazi power, they want to kill all the Jews, well, they'd be starting with the ones inside their own borders. But you're absolutely right. Everybody understands Iran is not really a threat to anybody. They're not a warlike nation. It's been 200 years since Iran initiated a war of conquest against another country, and certainly not since the revolution of 1979 that kicked out the U.S. puppet ruler, the Shah. So whether Israel means Pakistan or not, it's kind of hard to say. Iran is a threat to Israel because of its influence in the region. And, of course, Iran has been in the crosshairs of the private central bankers for quite a long time because they reject compound interest. They don't have a private central bank. And the private central bankers are so close to their goal of an entire world enslaved to private central banking, they're getting desperate to knock off those last few countries that have still escaped their slave chains.
Yeah, and I would be... I would wonder if Pakistan has a central bank. I bet you they don't. I mean, they're an Islamic country, but you don't hear nothing about Pakistan in the news ever. But
well, that's not true. They had a little bit of a border conflict with India just a few weeks ago, I think. They're still sneering over that Kashmir region.
All right, Mike, just thought I'd throw my 2 cents on that. Thanks for taking my call.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you both.
Aloha.
There you go. I heard about the commentary about the Bitcoin and being chippied and all that kind of good stuff, or one leading to the other and so forth ad nauseum. And I have a rather sad thought for you.
Yes.
If you happen to be unfortunate enough to end up with a driver's license that happens to have a chippy in it, or a bank card, charge card that happens to have a chip in it, you're already one step closer to having it, unfortunately, implanted.
Well, look at all the capabilities your smartphone has that the government uses to spy on you. They can listen to you, they can watch you, they can activate the cameras and mics remotely. They've got your GPS location. It almost seems like an actual implanted chip is kind of unnecessary at this point. People aren't willing to surrender their smartphones.
Well, I'll give you that. However, the only reason that such electronic toys like your cell phone, iPhone, whatever have you, iPad, whatever have you, technology-wise, the only reason that people are actually accepting that and allowing it to track them is because it has been made so seductively enticing to the person that they cannot live without it.
They're very useful.
Period. Well, yeah, but the problem is, whatever happened to using your brain in a map and a manual map and so forth to find out where you're going to go, or using a phone book to call a place that you need to go check on or go to?
Well, I think there's a mid-ground there. I mean, in the early days of mobile phones, that's all they were. They were telephones. And all this other stuff was added on after the fact. What's really annoying is here in Hawaii, unless your GPS is built into the dashboard, you can actually get a ticket using your smartphone GPS. So I guess they want us to go back to using paper maps as we drive.
Get a ticket? Oh, my God.
Yeah, a $300 ticket if you're, you can talk on your cell phone if you have an earpiece, but if you're actually working with the cell phone, with the screen or anything while you're driving, it's a $300 ticket. And there was a big stink a while ago because there was a water main breakdown in Waikiki, and the area was gridlocked. Nobody was moving, and drivers were just turning off the cars, turning off the engine, putting it in park, and they were getting out their smartphones to get caught up on email, and the cops were just walking from car to car writing these $300 tickets, even though the cars weren't actually being driven. Fortunately, a judge looked at this and threw the tickets out of court. But, I mean, that's the mindset that we have to deal with out here.
It's called revenue building, one way or the other.
Yes.
And letting people hang themselves by their own noose. Okay, well, have fun. Later.
I'll do my best. All right, thank you very much. The phone lines are open. Let me clear the little communication thing here. Okay, now then. The 3M Company, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing, has been named in a massive contamination scheme that allegedly cause widespread cancer. And apparently these chemicals were dumped by 3M in the Twin Cities metro area, and it's caused cancers, infertility rates to rise, and has resulted in babies with low birth weights. And in a court filing last week, Attorney General Lori Swanson alleged that the contamination resulted in $5 billion, with a B, in health and environmental damage, which according to Swanson, 3M should be liable for. And yes, I would agree with that. In addition, the court filing accused 3M of knowing that the groundwater had been contaminated for years, and the company intentionally withheld important information from the EPA. This was what got Pacific Gas and Electric in trouble with that whole Aaron Brockovich case and the hexavalent chromium. PG&E knew it was down there, knew it was causing problems, and they hid it. And boy, did they get nailed in that lawsuit here. Now, Israel has just canceled a touring exhibit of Dead Sea Scrolls. It was supposed to go to Germany. They were going to put it in a museum. People were going to look at it. And Israel has canceled the exhibit after the German government refused to guarantee that it would block Palestinian and Jordanian authorities from claiming ownership of the manuscripts. Now, a lot of people tend to think Dead Sea Scrolls, Israel. That's not exactly what happened. The Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in Jordan. And during one of Israel's many wars, they literally sent a military unit into where the scrolls were being stored, and they stole them. Took them back to Israel, put them up on display, and obviously Jordan would like them back. They'd like the original documents back. One of the issues that a lot of scholars have raised is that Israel is using computer graphics to supposedly reconstruct the scrolls and fill in what's missing. But the changes and corrections are not being marked. And so it's impossible to tell if what you're looking at was what was really originally written or something that has been rewritten to serve Israel's political agenda, because Israel relies very heavily on archaeology to justify its claiming of that part of planet Earth. And there has been a massive amount of archaeological fraud involved, such as the pomegranate temple staff ornament, the Jehoash tablet, a lot of unsupportable statements about Masada. So it is an issue. And once again, Israel just goes and grabs what it wants. It says if you want it back and complain, oh, you must be an anti-Semite. And by the way, that reminds me, a very bizarre thing. We're coming up here on the closing of the polls of Alabama. And apparently in a last desperate gasp to try and shoot down Judge Roy Moore, he and his wife have been accused of being anti-Semites. And apparently the reason they're saying they're anti-Semites is because Moore's wife, Kayla, said that she's not an anti-Semite. Oh, well, nothing's going to prove you're an anti-Semite more than saying you're not an anti-Semite. Well, therefore, it's one of those, have you stopped beating your wife kind of questions. There's no correct answer. I hope Moore wins. I mean, I'm really tired of just how dirty American politics have become. Getting on back to Israel and Palestine, story out of the Electronic Intifada. Apparently Israel, in addition to having seized the illegal settlements in the West Bank, is now basically dumping the toxic waste from those settlements back onto Palestinian land. They're just turning the West Bank into a dumping ground. This is in violation of international law. And Israel's environmental policy in the West Bank includes situating polluting waste treatment facilities there, and it's part and parcel of the policy of dispossession and annexation it's practiced in the West Bank for the last 50 years. This is a new report from the human rights group B'Tselem. And basically, Israel's exploiting the West Bank for their own benefits, ignoring the needs of the Palestinians almost entirely, and harming both them and their environment. Now, here's a funny story. A little bit of lighthearted news in the midst of all the doom and gloom here. We've all heard of Viagra. Little pill, supposed to help men do what Obama was doing on that campaign aircraft. And apparently the factory where it is made is in Ringaskiddy, County Cork, Ireland. It's been there for 20 years. And apparently the villagers living around the factory are complaining that the fumes coming out of the factory are giving local men and even animals a permanent state of arousal. And I'm not sure if that's a complaint or not, but apparently that's what's from downwind there. All right, let's grab ourselves a phone call. John in Rancho Cucamonga, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing today, Mike? Good to talk to you. Thanks for taking my call.
Doing fine.
Hey, regarding your comments earlier in the show, I've been listening to most of it, actually all afternoon, but your last comment there about how some people are still calling Judge Roy Moore an anti-Semite. My friend Marty Hill turned me on to this. I didn't figure it out myself, so I went to Judge Roy Moore's website. I even called up John Stadmiller's show about 2 months ago when I found this out. He claims that he supports Israel, and Israel is our ally, and we should, pretty much do whatever we can to ingratiate. He didn't say it in those words. I read it right off the website to John. I just don't have the thing handy. But so I was just wondering, I didn't hear you say that, and I was just wondering why you didn't say it, or were you aware of this?
I wasn't aware of it. I was basically responding to this false bit of logic that denying you're an anti-Semite is proof that you're an anti-Semite.
Yeah, that stretches the boundaries of logic, that's for sure. But
so does our entire political system.
In thinking back on how all this shook out, when I found that out from Marty, or from the website even, I was thinking back, well, Trump supported Judge Roy Moore's opponent in that statewide race that he was in, and then and then sometime later he sort of second guessed it or took it back a little bit, sidestepped it or stepped back and says, I may have supported the wrong candidate, or I may have, they're both good candidates. So I think that's probably when Trump found out about. This is my theory about how Judge Roy Moore supports the state of Israel. And I would think with all of these accusations being made, the people making the accusations, they already know it, but no one knows enough to use that against them.
Well, I think you're giving Trump credit for more subtlety than he actually has. Basically, the Republican Party in Alabama wanted their other candidate to reach this election, and it didn't work out. Judge Roy Moore prevailed in that. And Trump just decided, as a loyal Republican, he very well couldn't support the Democrat. And I think that's really all there was to that decision.
Yeah, I was probably being a little bit more than I had to in that regard. It's subtle anyway. So, yeah, I remember following Judge Roy Moore back in the early 2000s and his big, big confrontation with people that didn't like his Ten Commandments monuments outside his courtroom, sort of an accusation of crimes against people who come in or something like that. So anyway, but so I think a lot of people that call themselves Christians and Catholics and so forth, they all support Judge Roy Moore, but most of them are Zionist supporters and don't even realize what Zionism is, and I just thought I would just call and just let you know.
Well,
about that.
You've hit an important point there. There are too many people in this country who adopt a label as part of their identity. I'm a Republican. I'm a Democrat. I'm a Zionist. I'm this. I'm that. And they don't really understand what it is that they're aligning themselves with. And they really don't care. They just want to have a label that they can put on when they're in social circumstances to make it look like they've got some kind of a life.
Right. That's exactly correct. So, well, look, I'll let you get back to the rest of your show, Michael. I just want to make that point.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And there's no question this Alabama special election has been hugely dirty with all the allegations going on. Okay, apparently the polls are going to close in a little over an hour, so we're not going to be able to talk about the results until tomorrow. Now then, for all you space buffs, the rover Opportunity has survived the Martian winter for the 8th time. And that's quite impressive when you consider that it was only supposed to last for 90 days. But we went through that with Viking. That lasted far longer than it was supposed to. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go to the phones for one final call. Kathy in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Having grown up in the Deep South, let me just say that I spent some time in Bama, and I saw so many creepy men. Even the upright men there had that creepy guy predatory gene toward the girls. I'm not kidding you. I could blow your mind with what I heard. And I got the hell out of there. And a friend, someone I know up in Massachusetts told me, oh my God, you never want to go there. Because if you complain about your husband and creepy guy stuff, you get involuntarily committed, darling.
Well, I never heard that one before. I have to be honest, it sounds more like an urban legend to me. And the fact of the matter is, anywhere that you go, there are going to be gentlemen, and there are going to be creeps. Certainly a lot of them around Southern California, Las Vegas, and
I'm a female, and
even in Massachusetts. Even
bad.
in okay. Well, now you're slamming the entire state here now. All right. Well, Kathy, we're going to let you go because we're running out of time here, and we've got to get to the conclusion of the show. I have a comment here, and without getting into the politics of either party, and without getting into the parties that they belong to, it all comes down to this. A vote for that Democratic candidate is a vote for dirty politics, for false allegations, smear tactics, name-calling, and have we not had enough of that? We need to get back to elections that are based on what's going on with the country and what is best for the nation, its people. It shouldn't be a personality contest, you know, where the person with the best insults and the best wardrobe gets to take home the prize. And I find it very alarming that looking at 2020, that Oprah Winfrey and Michelle Obama are thinking about running. And it sort of underscores that the presidency has become a figurehead. But again, for those of you in Alabama, if you have not already gone to the polls, and there's only about another hour left for you to get there, a vote for that Democratic candidate is a vote for the continuation of dirty politics. And this nation cannot survive that for much longer. Alrighty, getting on back to the science news here. Apparently not too long ago, there was an asteroid that whizzed by Earth on November 9th. It was large enough to destroy a major city, and nobody noticed until after it had already gone by. And you know that NASA and a lot of other countries have invested a lot of money in these tracking telescopes to look for these near-Earth objects. And they missed this one. They also missed that big one that came down over Russia a couple of years ago. So maybe a new methodology is needed. Not that we could do anything about it. If we look up and that asteroid's heading our way, right now there's not a thing we can do about it. Me, I'll be up on the roof of the house naked with a bottle of scotch saying, "You want a piece of me? Come and get me!" Boom. And finally, killer whales are learning how to exploit fishing boats. They will follow the fishing boats until the nets are full, then they'll rip the nets open and eat the fish. And this is up in the Bering Sea, and the fishermen are saying, time to do something about it. Okay, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here. I got to do Jim Goddard's show now. Please stay tuned to John Stedmiller. He's got lots of interesting things to share with you. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. So until then, share what you learn here with everybody that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.